it sounds from your story that you were attracted to physical culture because of your childhood illness. You began with Charles Atlas and the Charles Atlas course, the bodyweight course. You discovered barbell and dumbbell training, strength training, through the Weider magazines. You found the Hoffman magazine, Strength and Health, Hoffman's high protein powder, and the big 4-pound box with John Grimmick on the cover, and Steve Stanko, Jules Bacon, and I think Jim Park was the other person.
Yeah.
And then you found Iron Man and Perry Rader, and from there you just went after everything.
I went crazy.
You had a complete collector's mentality, and you're only, what, 17 or 18?
Yes. And what I did was I took this very seriously. This was a hobby, okay? It wasn't how I made my living at the time or anything. I was buying this stuff. And I was storing it, squirreling it away in an upstairs bedroom where I lived with my parents, okay? So I had piles and piles, neatly, at least I thought, neatly stacked in various parts of the room. Under the bed, behind the bed. I managed to condense a lot of my clothing so I could use some drawers for special books that I like to know where they were at, so you know they were at hand. The important thing to know is I went from Charles Atlas, a bodyweight course, and I've talked to many people and I've listened to many people's soundboard, that Charles Atlas course doesn't work. Believe me, the Charles Atlas course has a purpose. Many of the individuals that downplay it, I say to them that it was a stepping stone. How would have you known about physical culture? How would you have known about exercise without that particular course? Now granted, you're limited as far as progression. Your body weight is your resistance. The only way you can increase or progress is through repetitions. But that's not the point. The point is, it was a stepping stone. Remember, I built my first set of weights out of coffee cans, water pipe, and cement. And it was a fixed weight. I would do curls today with the same weight that I did curls a year from now if I would have continued that way. They were not adjustable. I could not add weight. But it was a stepping stone, just like a fixed weight dumbbell, just like a fixed weight kettlebell, or a fixed weight barbell. And that's important to know, and that is key.
Well, if you look at your life, and if we were to fast forward into your career, and we'll cover that later, but you have sold books and courses and magazines and collector's editions and collector's items and a complete smorgasbord of strongman and strength training material for many, many years now. Do you have any idea how many people you've sold to over the years?
No.
Tens, 20s, we may be talking 100,000 or more. You have affected...
At least.
You have affected so many lives in a positive way by what you've done. And in your case, it all started with Charles Atlas. So, if you trace it, Charles Atlas affected you, you affected so many others, me included, for the better. Those people have affected people. It's like you throw a rock in a pond, you have ripples that go out. It's amazing. And that all started for you and the people that you have helped. It all started with Charles Atlas.
Yes, for the most part it was Charles Atlas. There were other bodyweight courses and what have you that I wanted to obtain and garner the information. I am a firm believer. There is no such thing as a bad course. There is no such thing as a bad book, nor a bad magazine, and I'll tell you why. It's important to come to grips with this concept. If the magazine, the publication, whatever you're reading, expounds a certain way, The author gives you their point of view. It's important for you to look at things from a different point of view because you're gradually changing, morphing. You're a teenager. You're a beginner. You're in your 20s. You're intermediate. You're in your 30s. You're advanced. You're in your 40s. Now, things are starting to change. You're in your 50s. They change even more. You cannot train at 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old like you were when you were 18. You have different issues. So, the body weight course, and there were several other ones that Joe Bonomo, who was also a contender for that same contest for Charles Atlas in 1921. He also had tremendous amount of different body weight, barbell, dumbbell courses. But the burning desire that I had is I was knocked out at the knees at 10 years old. I knew what it was like to lie in bed. When I visit older people that are in bedridden, I know what that felt like when I was in my 20s. I know what it is. It's like you're in jail, okay? I wanted so desperately to go outside and run with my friends and be in the fresh air. I never wanted that ever to happen again to me. And I honestly feel that physical culture has helped me maintain my health throughout the years. And more importantly, you have to consider it has to be done consistently. There were times that I would, as a young man around 20 years old, I'd get out there and I would train, and it was always the philosophy, if a little bit's good, well, more has certainly got to be better. That is not so. I learned that early on. I would look at the Weider magazine and all the sensationalism, and I would say, gosh, I'm going to put all these routines together. Here's a total body routine by Dave Draper. Oh, and Chuck Sipes, he's got a forearm routine, so I'll add that to my routine. Oh, and look at the legs on this guy, whoever it may be. And let's not forget Larry Scott. Everybody wanted those cannonball deltoids. So I would add all these together, and I'd come up with a 6-hour routine. Unrealistic.
And what Bill is describing is something that I did and something that I think everyone of our generation did. We cobbled together those workouts. I've told the story before. I got a copy of Muscle Builder Power, and it had Sergio Oliva's Mr. Olympia routine. And I didn't want to cut the page out of the magazine, and we didn't have a copy machine at home or a scanner, and I don't even think they had one at the library that you could use, so I couldn't make a photocopy. So I wrote out the routine on a sheet of yellow paper, hand wrote it out in pencil. I remember doing that. It took forever because it was just the longest exercise program you've ever seen. And I got home from school the next day, and I started doing it, and I kept on doing it, and it was dinner time, and my mom called, dinner, and I said, Mom, I'm still working out, and I kept on going, and everyone else had eaten, and they had dessert, and they were sitting around watching All in the Family or something else on TV, and I'm still in my room, still doing my Sergio Oliva workout, and finally, about 3 hours later, I'm done. And I go and I have dinner. I drag myself into the kitchen because I'm so exhausted, so beat up. And later, after doing that program for a couple of weeks, and bags under my eyes.
You lasted that long.
I was stubborn. I was young and I was foolish and I was stubborn. And bags under my eyes, and I'm just weak as a kitten, and nothing is working. This is not turning me into Sergio Oliva. I look at the magazine article again. I go back to the actual article and read it instead of my handwritten notes. And it ends with a little note that says, That concludes Sergio's Monday training program. We will bring you his Tuesday workout next month. And I realized at that point that this workout that I'd been killing myself with was just Sergio Oliva's Monday workout. And there was another one just as long and complicated with different exercises that he did on Tuesday and a different one on Wednesday. And I figured it out. I'd have to wait for 6 issues of the magazine, that's 6 months, to get the whole workout. And I said, you know what? I can't wait that long. I've got to be Mr. America tomorrow. I can't wait. You know, so I looked elsewhere, and I gave up on Sergio Oliva and, you know, moved on to the next one, which is laughable, but it's what we all did. And the crazy thing is that there are so many people who, at age 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, are still doing that teenage silliness that we did when we were 15. And that's amazing. And the other thing is, in my case, this is something that I was doing back in like 1968, 1969, perhaps a few years earlier for you. People are still doing it in 2015. They're still doing those long, crazy 3-hour programs, training 6 days a week, you know, the whole bit. It's just absolutely remarkable that people keep making this mistake and making it and making it and making it. And so many people don't seem to learn from the mistakes of others, which is a shame.
It's important to know, and a lot of people, again, just as with the Charles Atlas course, people love to beat up on the muscle comics. And that being the slick, glossy magazines, and not only Weider, but of course, Bob Hoffman. Bob Hoffman's Strength and Health and his muscular development, as well as Weider's muscular development and Mr. America, around the time I started interest, Dan Lurie's magazine, Muscle Training Illustrated, which had started in January 1965. So I eventually picked up a couple copies of that. Reg Park was on the front cover of the first one. I still have that issue. The thing to know is, again, a stepping stone. If I had not walked by that magazine rack and saw that first issue of Muscle Builder, and again, Strength and Health, where would I be? It spurned an interest. It picked up where the Atlas Bodyweight course left off. And like I said before, it's important to know, I've never seen a book, magazine, course, anything that I consider bad. It's important that learning the wrong way is just as important as learning the right way. You never learn anything by doing something right the first time. You didn't learn anything. You knew how to do it. You did it right. You learn from failure. Failure is a marvelous teacher. Well, I did that wrong. I'm going to try it this way. I see what I did wrong. Brooks gave a perfect example. He wanted to train like Sergio Oliva. And he did, according to the magazine. Was that really Sergio Oliva's routine? Who's to know? Personally, I doubt it. The other thing to remember is with those magazines, writers of magazines, especially back in the day, and this is way before the internet, they have deadlines. John Grimmick used to say this to me after he retired. He says, of all the things that I don't regret, and that's having that deadline looming over my head every month. There were monthly magazines back then. So you have a deadline where you've got to put black ink on white paper. And another thing, keep in mind, just because a man is good at a particular feat or endeavor, whatever it may be, doesn't make any difference if it's in the fitness world, bodybuilding, weightlifting, what have you. It does not mean he can write. It does not mean that he's even literate. So, a lot of times you will see publications with a title a picture of the individual, by, and the individual's name, and then it will have with another individual. That with the other individual is the individual who is writing the publication. This is the important part. He's writing it. They may sit down with a tape recorder. They may sit down with notes. He's putting it together. He's checking the grammar. He's making the sentences and paragraphs and chapters flow. Okay? And a lot of times you have what is called ghostwriters for magazines. A lot of these bodybuilders either don't care to or they don't have the time to write these articles. So they have a ghostwriter step in. They may not even talk to that individual. That individual with his pictures and posing for the various exercises, he may just lend his name to it. And that's the thing you have to keep in mind about the slick, glossy magazines. I preferred Iron Man magazine because it gave a start to many what I considered backyard trainees, cellar dwellers, we like to call them. They trained in their basement, or like they say out east, their cellar, their garage. Brooks still trains in his garage. I train in my garage. The important thing to know is these guys use those gyms as their own laboratories. And they would come up with all sorts of new training ideas. And Perry Rader would give them the opportunity to write an article and send in photographs. He wanted that information. For example, Professor Bradley J. Steiner. He was a consistent writer for Iron Man from I believe he started around 1969, 1970. I knew him from that time. I've known him for years. I believe he wrote for the magazine until it finally changed hands in 1986. Another friend of mine was Anthony DiTillo from Elizabeth, New Jersey. He was a fantastic powerlifter, and he wrote a lot of articles. He was a constant contributor. He also wrote 2 books. But this is the thing you have to keep in mind is the information. There is so much of it out there before the internet. Now there's just an unbelievable amount. But as I said before, information is good. You have different points of view, but they're not all totally accurate because all of us are different. You know, if an 18-year-old looks at a routine, it might work for him, but it may not work for a 40-year-old. So you have to look at training information from the perspective of your own age, where you are in your training, equipment available, time available, and you have to have a burning desire and enthusiasm to become consistent with all of your training. Otherwise, it doesn't make any difference what you're doing or what you're doing it with. You won't be successful.
You have a more charitable view of this than anyone that I know. And I am distinctly in the non-charitable camp. And yeah, you know, there are a lot of people who believe that they were lied to or cheated or done wrong by what they view as misinformation in the muscle magazines that they read when they were younger. And a lot of people 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later are still angry about that. Some aren't angry as much as they laugh at the foolishness of their younger years. But you are really, truly the most charitable person, and I've never known anyone else to lay it out the way you do, which is everything is good, and you're always looking at the good in things.
Absolutely.
You know, which I think is part of the passion that you have for the iron game and physical culture and all of the learnings and all of the teachings of physical culture. And you're always looking for the good in anything. And I know from conversations, and you know, we've talked many times over the years, I know that that's the way you view people as well.
Absolutely.
I always try to get Bill to say evil things about people that I believe are evil, and he always disappoints me because he only says nice things about pretty much anybody.
Well, believe me, that's just because I don't say them doesn't. It certainly is no indication that you know, there's certain individuals I would rather have nothing to do with. I stay away from certain individuals. They're out there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to candy coat it. They're definitely out there, but I look at it from the standpoint of view of steering clear. You know, for years, again, a lot of people beat up on Joe Weider. Oh, you know, God bless him. Okay. He was a tremendous promoter, okay? He made people aware of fitness through his publications, okay? And the people that beat up on him are shooting themselves in the foot because you're aware of him. You saw his magazine. Maybe you tried one of his courses. What did you discover? They didn't work. Like I said earlier, all the publications I've ever seen, it's important to learn the right way and the wrong way. You learned the wrong way. And when you learn the wrong way, you search. You get up after you've tried Sergio Oliva's routine for 3 hours, and you sit there at the dinner table that your mother's been, you know, waiting patiently, and you fall into your soup.
Just like that.
And we've all done it. We all wake up the next day. I remember doing power cleans. I got a snoot full of a routine in a magazine. Do these power cleans, 5 sets of 8. You know, bang! I'm slamming these mothers, and I wake up the next day, and I'm like this, and I couldn't straighten out my arms for 15 minutes. Okay, my back was killing me. My hamstrings. I was, you know, Mother Nature handed them to me in a brown paper bag. It was terrible, okay? What did I learn? Whoa! I've got to, if I'm going to do that, and it's not saying I can't do it, I can't do it now. I've got to work up to it. You follow me here? That's where progression comes into it. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.